Adam Štěch, I'm really happy that this lecture was possible. We met half a year ago, no, a bit more, but half a year ago we met physically in Flims. You made an exhibition with a part of your incredible collection of photographs from houses. And I did response to your exhibition with some work of Rudolf Olgiati, which gave at the end, I think, quite a poetic collaboration between two different voices in architecture. And I really enjoyed these meetings and the discussions and the presentations we had, that I thought it was important to show it to the students, but not just only, because it's not just interesting for the students. I think you really have a message to give. I love your ambition and your passion to meet people and architecture and talk and interact. And that's why I asked you for a lecture. You have an incredible collection. We started with more buildings which are in my theme, which more Alpine architecture, and we ended up in a very poetic thing, architecture and surrealism, which I think is perfectly okay, because at the end it will be a game between talking and reflecting architecture. And I think it's not about a specific style, it's more about reflecting what we're doing here. And that's then it doesn't matter where you're coming from, because the things you're talking or you're interested is a bit always the same. It's this, in German, Gesamtkunstwerk in architecture. In a specific moment from 1908, 10 to the 1980s, late 80s. It depends a bit where one wants how to measure it. And I think you are an architecture historian and researcher. You collaborate a lot with magazines, and you do exhibitions. You talk about the architecture, fashion, art theory, architecture theory, and this interaction, I think, is super important for you. And I think this focus, how far one can go with architecture, is extremely visible in the buildings you research on and you focus on. And I think that's super good, that architecture can be much more than just a building. Architecture is not just a Gesamtkunstwerk, but it's just even that it's even that the idea of how far design can go and how far design can be. And therefore I'm quite happy to welcome you. And probably you will show a part of your incredible 5,000 photograph buildings collection. Nevertheless, I'm just curious to hear what you have to say, because and I'm really looking forward to the lecture. Just one thing, we talk about architecture and surrealism, which is already surrealistic in the sense how surrealistic architecture can be.
Yes.
Because surrealism is much more a poetic thing. It's in art. It's in sculptures, in painting, in movies, and so on. And it's always realistic. And to go over this realistic event of a building, but anyway, what's super important with architecture and the surrealism is going beyond the actual reality. And to develop architecture, to develop further architecture, is going beyond and thinking it further is a super important thing. I'm really looking forward to your lecture, and I'm really looking forward to discuss this thing afterwards. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So I will probably share my screen if I can.
You just can kick me out.
Oh, yes. Okay, and I will. Okay, so I hope everybody see the start of the presentation.
Looks good.
And hopefully everybody is hearing me. Thank you very much for introduction. Thank you for inviting me. I'm really happy that I can share my passion and hopefully some knowledge about architecture and some kind of a maybe the way how to uh, see the architecture and how to let's say how to tell the stories about the architecture. And as Daniel said, I am since let's say almost 20 years I'm interested in architecture history, and kind of my focus is let's say lesser known topics of architecture history. I always want to go a little bit outside of the mainstream and to try to find out like a different phenomena, different movements which are not so typical, let's say, for architecture history and its let's say and its translation, but are maybe a little bit hidden somewhere at the corner or behind the wall because they were maybe not really let's say um, dominant, these movements, and they were maybe a little bit hiding, and that's actually the case of surrealism. And why I choose this lecture is or this topic is also a little bit about that, because surrealism, as Daniel said, it's a little bit more like ephemeral movement of art, which has no rational background, let's say. It's quite opposite, actually. It's made of dreams and fiction. And as architects or historians of architecture, as you can see, of course, buildings are built from real bricks and real steel and real concrete. And there is not so much space for dreaming or some fiction as on the surrealist paintings, for example. But even this movement, the movement of surrealism, somehow imprinted itself in architecture and, let's say, interior design or product design, which I will be mentioning all these disciplines. So my lecture will guide you through the evolution of idea of surrealism and its application in a world of architecture and also, let's say, decorative arts of the 20th century. So it's more than 100 years. Actually, last year in October 2024, it was exactly 100 years from the foundation of Surrealist group in Paris, and you can see this notorious picture of quite famous artists who gather in Paris, and they belonged to the let's say most radical movement at that time in avant-garde art. And the main figure of the surrealism is André Breton, which was a literature guy and a poet and a collector and let's say theoretician. And he set up around him the group of young artists as Salvador Dali or Max Ernst or Man Ray or Yves Tanguy and Paul Eluard, and many others. But all these artists, they were rather painters or poets than architects and designers. Because, of course, Surrealism is, as I already mentioned a little bit, about our psychological sphere, let's say. It goes down deep to our mental states, and it uncovers, let's say, hidden fears and dreams of people. And I can read a little bit what Breton stated about Surrealism in 1924 when he wrote his manifesto. So this is a quote from Breton. Surrealism is a pure psychic automatism by which a person can express verbally through the written word or in any other way the real functioning of thought. Action is dictated by thought without any control exercised by reason, free from aesthetic or moral concerns. So this was the, let's say, description of Surrealism. So Surrealist artists, they wanted to work above their rational thinking. There were many different new, let's say, influences in this. Mostly the research of Freud and his psychoanalysis, the research of human dreams, and all these things influenced very notorious examples of surrealist art of the 20s, as, for example, Salvador Dali or Max Ernst. All these paintings show us, let's say, bizarre world, like a fictional, mythical, or really like a kind of fairy tale world, which really doesn't happen in everyday life. So also surrealism means above reality, because it was already Guillaume Apollinaire, the famous poet and literature guy, who named it first already in 1917, before surrealism was invented. So he first used this word surreality, which means above reality in French. And this movement was super important in the interwar Paris. It really brings together a lot of artists coming from all around the world, doing amazing things. And as I said, most of the artists were oriented to poetry or painting. But also there were some artists who tried to expand into the space, and we can name it, for example, Alberto Giacometti, the Swiss sculptor. He experimented with surrealism in his kind of a scenography objects, which also looks like a little bit like a kind of architecture models. And he worked with the tension of different shapes, as you can see it here, the tension between something rounded and nice against something sharp and dangerous, let's say. So this kind of a tension is also very typical for surrealist movement. And this is the exhibition at Vitra Design Museum, 2019. I think it was the best exhibition to date, which looked at the influence of surrealism in design and furniture objects, which there are quite a lot of them, which are particularly inspired by, let's say, surrealist jokes and irony and contrasts, as you can see here. there are even predecessors of surrealists. Actually, when André Breton came to Prague in the 20s, Prague in Czech Republic, our city, was really at the time was one of the centers of modernism, like a modernist architecture. And Breton, he met Karel Taige, and Karel Taige, he was one of the leading theoretician of modern architecture, and he believed in standardization and like a scientific approach to architecture. But on the other hand, he was also interested in surrealism. But when he talked to André Breton and he asked him, so André, who do you think is the best architect of our time? And Taige thought that probably Breton will tell like a Corbusier or someone like this. But actually, André Breton said Factor Cheval. And Factor Cheval was basically, he was a psychologically ill man who was obsessed during his lifetime to build a palais for his daughter. His daughter was a little girl, and Factor Cheval was he was a postman, and he during his service in France. When he went to deliver the letters around the landscape, he always brought some stones with him into his bag, and at the end he built this crazy thing, which is a architecture without any references, any historical references. It's a pure imagination where you can maybe explore some even like motifs from Romanesque architecture or maybe medieval Gothic. But Factor Cheval, he was not an architect. He was an ordinary man, and he just did this for his daughter. And it's called Palais Ideal, the ideal palace, and you can still visit. It's now open to the public. Even Antonio Gaudi was the architect who was mentioned by surrealists when they were asked about architecture. So we know that Antonio Gaudi was a leader of, let's say, Catalan modernism movement, but at the end of his career, his work was very imaginative, even like similar to kind of natural organic forms, and this was kind of fascination for surrealists. You can see the details which Antonio Gaudi created for his buildings, which let's say they give audience a huge space for imagination, and that was something which surrealists really liked. And the other example is Hector Guimard, who created these entrances into Paris metro stations, and these kind of biomorphal shapes which look like some even like alien structures. This was something which really fascinated surrealists. So these architects can be somehow related to surrealists, but of course we can't say that they are surrealist architects. They only, let's say, convey the surrealists with their imagination. Here is one more, let's say, predecessor of surrealism, let's say, or this kind of a really the fiction and huge amount of creativity, which is Michael Bossart. He was actually Swiss, but he lived in Hamburg, close to Hamburg, in Jesteburg, and in Germany, and he built this kind of a crazy place for himself and his wife, and he quite soon even opened it to the public, because it was kind of a artistic, also kind of a modern art palace. This is actually his house, and he decorated all the house by very, let's say, very wild ornamentation and paintings. Everything was covered, all single piece of a furniture, walls, floors or carpets, doors, as you can see. And you can see a lot of, let's say, fictional visions, visions of the future, or visions of some, let's say, prehistoric legends, which he wanted to let's say illustrate. And all his house is basically a book which you don't read, but you see, you looked at, and you basically go through his house, and you can, let's say, read some of his stories of his life and of his visions. And of course, there is a quite huge influence of expressionism in this building, but also surrealism was or can be here, let's say noted for these like a visionary paintings, and you can see it here in his original painting studio. And this is the palace, the like a small kind of a pavilion which he built until the 50s. He was building himself. And it is kind of a celebration of art, according to him. And this is also today open to public, so highly recommend to visit this very, very special place. So, but when we are going back to the really the main roots of surrealism, we have to mention also the connection of surrealism with objects. And this is very, very like, let's say, very, very pure to surrealism, that artists worked with the objects, basically with the applied art objects, with basically with the design, that they moved and they push it to different meanings. Of course, the famous fountain by Marcel Duchamp, who created this kind of a ready-made idea. You also know Man Ray with his again this tension of something familiar but completely disordered by something weird. And this is the iron with the nails, which is completely contradiction to each other. And there is Oscar Dominguez, who created this, let's say, luxurious seating out of a peasant wheel, like something which is associated with the work on the field, on the countryside, but he completely covered this object with the velvet, and he made it again. He created this contrast, and probably the contrast of something familiar with something which brings the object to the different meaning is somehow the thing which plays the essential role in a surrealist art or a surrealist applied art and surrealist design. So this is Jean-Michel Frank. It's a very legendary interior decorator. He was a friend with all surrealists, with Salvador Dali, with Alberto Giacometti. He was a kind of a really like a cult personality in the 1920s Parisian avant-garde scene. And what he did, interiors for very rich people, some mostly some art collectors and people who supported young artists. And his paintings, his interiors sometimes has this feeling of emptiness, which is one of the another let's say typical features of surrealist architecture. Maybe you know Giorgio de Chirico. I will show him later, the famous painter who painted these like of a kind of a very metaphysical, very empty views of cities and so on. And this kind of emptiness is also in Jean-Michel Frank's work. And Jean-Michel Frank also did this collaboration with Salvador Dali. This is a painting. This is a painting of Lips of Mae West. Mae West was a famous actor, considered as a kind of a sex symbol of that era. Basically, Salvador Dali painted this painting. And as you can see, her face is the room, is the interior. Here is the stairs. Her lips are as a sofa, and her nose is a fireplace, and her eyes are paintings. And this is a drapery, or like a textile, hanging textile. And this interior was actually recreated in a real setting, and this is actually the sofa which Jean-Michel Frank designed according to Salvador Dali's idea, and it was like this. It was placed in one interior. So this is really the connection, the exact, the tight connection between the painting of surrealism and its extension to real space, to real world, actually, where one feature of the painting became applied art object. And actually this sofa, it had another lives, let's say. This was in the 70s when this architect Oscar took Blanca. He asked Salvador Dali, who was still alive, to reintroduce his lip sofa to the collection of BD Barcelona, who is the company which is producing this sofa until now. Actually, the Jean-Michel Frank, he collaborated also with Alberto Giacometti and Salvador Dali. These are two lamps which Jean-Michel Frank commissioned from Giacometti and Dali. So this was Giacometti. This is obviously Salvador Dali. So for these painters, it was a good job, because at the beginning of their careers, they were quite poor. The paintings were not sold as good. So of course, some good money they could do on these commissions from Jean-Michel Frank, because he was really like a decorator of the top elite and very, very rich people. And as you can see, this structure of the lamp, you can see it how it's repeated in the paintings by Salvador Dali, and this kind of structures reminds me a little bit some kind of a modernist structures, but in totally different way, in more like chaotic like a way. And it's quite some let's say also features which is let's say architectural feature. This is also another like collaboration between Salvador Dali and Elsa Schiaparelli, who was the fashion designer at the time. And she was very experimental. And here we can see the dresses designed by Dali, and also the telephone, which was also designed by Salvador Dali for this time for Edward James. I will talk about this guy a little bit more later. And before I will go into the architecture again a little bit more. Here you can see another two surrealist artists. It's a Jean Arp, who was an organic sculptor, let's say, creating this kind of a organic biomorphical shapes, and also Yves Tanguy, who was a painter, and he did the same kind of in the paper. But as you can see, this painting, it also looks like a little bit some landscape with some unidentified dwellings, or even some like caves or something like that. And this is quite important for this one. I think this is probably where surrealism and architecture came together the closest in its history. Unfortunately, only on paper. So this is the work of Roberto Matta. Roberto Matta is famous as a painter. He had a big career as a painter. He was a Chilean. He was from Chile. And he came in the 30s to Paris, and he studied architecture. So he wanted to do architecture. But through the time, he abandoned the architecture career and became a painter. This is one of his paintings, but this is the important thing, what I want to talk about. It's called Mathematics Sensible, or so-called sensitive mathematics, architecture du temps, architecture of time. And this is, I think, the most important manifesto of, let's say, surrealist architecture. And he wrote it in 1938. And at the time, Roberto Matta was at the studio of Le Corbusier. So he was a protege of Corbusier. He was his assistant. And he was, in the meantime, he was thinking about how surrealist architecture could look like. And he drew this piece of a drawing or illustration. And you can see some kind of architecture features as a like a carved wall. You can see some pillars which really look like those Salvador Dali's features on his paintings. You can see some furniture and even some staircase here. So it really like is deriving or is arriving from this Salvador Dali aesthetic on his paintings. And I want to read you what Roberto Matta was thinking about architecture. So this is exactly from his manifesto. And he wrote, "We need walls like dump slabs that lose their shape and connect with our psychological fears. We need furniture that rolls out from unexpected places, moves away, falls, fills like a walk in the water." And this suggests that he was like dreaming of a spaces which were be moving, which will be changing through our psychological state of mind, let's say. So if I would say maybe some example, I think he was thinking that if you are in a space and you will think that I would like to sit down, so the wall will change and the wall will pop up with the bench and you can sit. So it is kind of a ever-changing environment which will be always fit to your needs, but you will never tell them, but you will only think of them and they will happen, which of course is kind of a utopia. But maybe even with contemporary current technologies like AI or everything, maybe one day it will be even possible. So this was Roberto Matta, and he actually, and it's very shame, he never built he never built anything. This is just like a really theoretical state of his thinking about surrealism, and he only designed some pieces of furniture, unfortunately. But the architect who built something actually was Paul Nelson. Paul Nelson was an American architect, but he worked in Paris from the 30s until the 60s, and he worked with a lot of artists like Alexander Calder or Fernand Léger, and many others. And this is the house he designed, but also didn't build. This is just the model, which is now at the MoMA in New York. It's called Suspended House, and it's a kind of a house of art. As you can see, it's a totally transparent box with this very interesting steel structure, and all rooms inside are suspended from the ceiling. So that's why it's called suspended house. So it's very like a technologically advanced building, but he filled the building, or at least the model, he filled it with some art works, paintings and sculptures, and it's quite connected to surrealism because there were a lot of artists working at the time in surrealism involved. This is Joseph Cornell. He did this like a very funny boxes, which look like a little bit like a rooms or like a small houses. But of course, it's art. It's a still art discipline. So, but let's go to real architecture, which could be named as surrealist. So this guy, this is Charles de Bestegue. This was one of the richest guy in the world at the time. He was a Mexican billionaire in the 1920s and 30s, and he really doesn't look like as an average client of Le Corbusier, but he was a client of Corbusier, and Charles de Bestegue commissioned apartment by Corbusier, which is called Apartment de Bestegue. It was on the top of already existing apartment building in France, in Paris. You can see it's on the Champs-Élysées. Here is the Arc de Triomphe, and this was kind of a new penthouse which he built it on the top. And Charles de Bestegue was a really good person who hosted parties. He was a notorious with his parties. I read some text, and probably he was the one who made the biggest, the most craziest parties in Paris in the 20s and 30s. So even this apartment was a kind of a party apartment, and actually there is Wim van den Berg who wrote a book about this apartment, and he called it Machine à Mousse. So he didn't call it as Le Corbusier liked to call the house. The house is a machine to live in, so house as a machine, but he called it as a machine for enjoyment, for fun, for having to having fun. And unfortunately, this apartment doesn't exist anymore. And you can see even the photography, how was like choreographed, let's say, with this parrot here, with this weird chimney or a fireplace and the mirror, which really looks like from some Salvador Dali dreamy painting. And as you can see, also the equipment of the apartment was really crazy. It was some kind of a Rococo furniture, which was decorated by Charles de Bestegui himself. Charles de Bestegui also worked with this guy called Emilio Terry, who he was Cuban based, or like Cuban origin, architect, interior decorator. He is a portrait of Emilio Terry by Salvador Dali, and you can see on the painting here is this spiral tower. And here it's a drawing with this spiral tower on the top of this kind of a crazy shaped rock formation. And Emilio Terry, he mostly designed interiors and like a small pavilions, but he never really went into real architecture. But as you can see, there are some pretty interesting stuff here, which almost looks like a postmodern variations. Like some pavilions from the bushes, or from the rocks. Or here he designed this console table, which looks like a composition of the rocks. So this is, I think, the architect who would deserve some attention and some more research, because he did really amazing stuff already in the 20s and 30s. And a little bit similar is Serge Roche, another, let's say, surrealism inspired creator and designer. And of course, I have to mention also the project of Corbusier here, because as you know already, or as I mentioned, in Corbusier was Roberto Matta at the time, who wrote this sensitive mathematics manifesto. So the studio of Corbusier was kind of an epicenter of what is in at the time, what was in at the time. So also surrealism was kind of interesting for Corbusier. And even we know him as an architect of rational buildings and rationalization and prefabrication and so on. It's not that true, actually, because Corbusier was primarily artist, and he designed like his buildings very freely as artist. And I think I would like to mention here his own apartment, or his building, which he built in the 1934 in Paris. It's called Apartment Molitor. And I think this is, let's say, the closest project where Corbusier, let's say, somehow was inspired by surrealism. Here you can see the sculpture, which was designed by Corbusier as well. It also a little bit reminds some surrealist sculptures, but his apartment is funny. It has like all these like kind of a little bit weird features or details, as this like a staircase, which is like very organic, not really rational. Even this features here in his bathroom, or this funny bed on this like high stilts. So kind of a little bit, I think, like Corbusier, when he designed it for himself, he wore more he was more free and more artistic maybe than usual here. And also this work with the with the natural wood pieces, it also brings him a little bit toward the surrealism a little bit. Actually, there is the theory of one Czech art historian who connects Czech modernist architecture with surrealism, and it is through this villa, which is called Villa Wollmann, which was built at the end of the 30s. And this Villa Wollmann is kind of Corbusier style architecture, but on the same time there are more like organic features in the house. There are carved walls, there is a lot of colors, as also Corbusier used colors, but there are some writings existed that stated that this villa was somehow influenced by the research of psychoanalysis and how architecture influenced people, what shapes and what colors can influence people in a positive or in a negative way. And this building was kind of built around this idea, so it has a lot of different kind of shapes. Even it's a modernist villa, it has this, let's say, connotations with surrealism. And this is one more example from a Czech architecture. This is the house, which really looks like some kind of a alpine chalet, but it's actually the house from the 40s by these architects František Cubr and Zdeněk Pokorný. And this is the archive picture of the interior. As you can see, there is a kind of a huge photomontage. There is a photography applied on the wall, and it's a photography of a Baroque sculpture from Prague. And this kind of a juxtaposition of architecture itself and this like a oversized picture of the sculpture, it gives some kind of a little bit again this tension of forms in this way. So, and now probably let's say most important application of surrealism from that Corbusier line or from Corbusier environment is the example of architect Antonio Bonet Castellana. He was Catalan. He was from Barcelona. He was a friend with Dali, with Picasso, and so on. And he is also the designer of this very famous chair. It's called BKF chair, or so-called butterfly chair, which he designed at the end of the 30s. And this guy, Castellana, he worked for Corbusier in the 30s. And he met in Corbusier studio in Paris, he met this Juan Curjan and Jorge Ferrari Hardoy. They were both Argentinian architects working for Corbusier. And in 1937, Bonet was writing about his experience in Corbusier studio. So this is a quote for him. I connect surrealist concepts with the functionalist architecture, which was in the fashion at the time. For me, it meant to be free from too strict rational thinking. He was talking about some particular projects he did for Corbusier in his studio. And he had in mind that, okay, modernism is fine, but could be maybe interesting to little bit as he said, enrich the rational system of modernism thinking with something a little bit slightly different. And this happened in Argentina because Castellana emigrated to Buenos Aires in 1938, and he started to publish this magazine called Magazine Austral. And this magazine published architecture and design. It was kind of a first architecture, avant-garde architecture journal in Argentina. And Antonio Bonet, I think he was only 25 years old or something like that, even younger. He built his first projects at the time, and this was the project. It's Atelier Suipacha, Paraguay. It's an atelier building. It was a communal building for artists, and they had different studios in this building. They basically share the building for their purposes, and they exhibit it together. And I think this building, it's my theory. It's my impression from what I saw, from what I know, that this building, it's the, let's say, the most strong example of surrealist architecture, if we can call it like that. I mean, because it's connected to Corbusier and Roberto Matta and his sensitive mathematics manifesto. Antonio Bonet created this building. Here you can see this beautiful sketch axonometry, and you can see it that it's a rationalist building. It's based on a, let's say, concrete structural elements, concrete skeleton, with the pillars, with the concrete walls, with the hanging facade, basically all Corbusian features. But on the same time, it's very organic. It has very interesting floor plans, as you can see here. These are the studios which were located here. They were double high studios with this kind of a very interesting shapes of the balconies, or like terraces. So everything is very organic, and even Antonio Bonet himself was talking, or he was writing about so-called automatic architecture and automatism, or automatic painting, automatic poetry. It was the key to surrealists. What it means. Automatic poetry was based on, let's say, kind of uncontrolled writing of words, of associations, without some rational system. This was kind of what surrealists did. And Antonio Bonet is thinking about automatic spaces, automatic interiors. And here we can see it a little bit, because they are like the spaces. For example, here, this is actually the terrace. They are kind of divided with these very organically conceived partitions and different kind of walls, and they somehow navigate you through the space automatically. So this is kind of a notion which could connect this project to really the core of surrealist ideas. And here you can see two photos. This is my photo from my first visit of this building. I visited this building in 2016, which you can still see. There was a new floor placed, which is of course not original. And this is how it looks now. They restore it again. They put it out, and now the building is again, let's say, in its full original glory. And here you can see this one of those kind of automatic element in the interior, which is this beautiful wall, like opening wall, which works as a little bit like kind of a kinetic sculpture, which is on the hinges, and basically only one move can open all these three elements of this partition. And here again, little bit Salvador Dali aesthetic, let's say. It again looks a little bit like his, as you remember, these paintings where he had all these kind of wooden sticks which support something. So this looks a little bit like that. Also, do you see the floor? It's not straight. The floor is carved as well. And from then there is suddenly this kind of a pillar, you know. So it also can be visually at least related to what actually surrealist paintings were on. I will show you one more project of Antonio Bonet, which is Solana del Mar. This is the hotel and the restaurant, which I went to the almost end of the world. It's in Uruguay, in Punta del Este, which is beautiful, like a place by the sea. And Antonio Bonet was commissioned to design this beautiful small hotel and a restaurant in 1947. This was kind of a groundbreaking project because it was, even at the time, it was already designed as an ecological project where only necessary will be damaged in terms of, for example, cutting the trees or so. So everything was like designed in a very sensitive relation to the nature. And this building served as a kind of a center of this whole kind of a resort. So Antonio Bonet also designed kind of a different little houses around this. But this is kind of the main building. As you can see, unfortunately, the building suffered some damage. It is like 15 years ago when the typhoon hit the seaside, and the building was quite damaged. So unfortunately, it's not all completely original. As you can see, the roof is different now. It had a roof with this kind of a almost Alvar Aalto-esque structure on the top, which is there not anymore. But at least the interior and some part of interior survived, and it's still possible to see. Actually, now I don't know. I heard that the hotel is now closed, like completely, permanently. But I was there, and I was able to visit the interior. And here you can see a little bit more like kind of a Corbusier style architecture, influenced also with these kind of organic biomorphic shapes of Roberto Matta manifesto. I really like this chimney. As you can see, it's a double-decker chimney, so you have a fireplace here and you have a fireplace as well here. And it really looks like Corbusier's chimneys at the top of Unité de Habitation. And there is another link to Surrealism, and again, this is only my theory, let's say, or kind of idea which I did only through observing the building, which I found this beautiful detail of the joint system, which is from metal. And here you can see the examples which illustrates the obsession of surrealist architects or surrealist painters and artists with African art, with the African masks and so on, which were also used in the Pablo Picasso paintings and so on. This is the collection of André Breton, which you can see now in the Centre Pompidou. And this is kind of only my visual attachment to it, that even this very functional, let's say, structural element here looks a little bit like some African mask, you know. So even these details Antonio Bonnet created with this kind of a storytelling and this organic shapes. We will stay a little bit in South America or Latin America. Of course, you know these buildings. These are ateliers of Frida Kahlo and Diego Rivera by Juan O'Gorman. These are 100% modernist, functionalist buildings. They don't have really much in common with surrealism. But what is interesting is the later work of Juan O'Gorman, who mainly in the 40s, he moved from the modernism to, let's say, regionalist architecture, which was really much inspired by the local pre-Columbian art. So the artworks of Aztecs, of Inks, of Mayans, all these ancient civilization which influenced Gorman. And he built, for example, this amazing university library in Mexico, which is all covered with the lava stone mosaic, with all these kind of legends through the Mexican history. And this was his house. I think this is really crazy house, which looks like a cavern, which looks like a cave. It was even featured at the time in the Life magazine. And as you can see, it's a little bit gaudy, you know, like all these like snakes here and different animals. So this was kind of a total different move for Gorman, and he was somehow exploring the borders of surrealism. It's not by chance, because actually Mexico was kind of a post-war mecca of surrealists. You know, of course, Frida Kahlo was surrealist painter, but also other different European painters came to Mexico, as, for example, Wolfgang Pahlen, or there were also Mexican painters like Rufino Tamayo, and so on. And actually, the architect who built a lot of houses for those artists was Max Chetto. And Max Chetto was a German. He was a pupil of Hans Pelzig in Berlin. And then he emigrated to Mexico City, and he built this beautiful house, which I visited. You can visit now. It's open to public. It's really worth to visit. It's a beautiful structure on the lava rocks, and there are a little bit kind of a small hints to, let's say, surrealism, but mostly I show it to here because he was the architect for surrealist painters. So, for example, it's a little bit not so well preserved studio for painter Rufino Tamayo, which you have here. And Rufino Tamayo is one of the most leading Mexican surrealist artists. So Max Chetto was really connected to these surrealist things. So, and then we have here Edward James. This guy was not an architect, nor the designer, nor the artist. He was a very rich guy. He was a British. He was a patron. He bought a lot of paintings from surrealist painters in the 20s, 30s. I think he mostly bought paintings from Salvador Dali, who was his friend, and Edward James was a little bit avant-garde, and this is his family estate. It's a house called Moncton in West Dean in I think it's in Wales, in the UK. And this was the house built by Edwin Lutyens. It's a British architect in kind of a pre-modernist style. And he completely he wanted to redesign this house, and he invited different people, different artists, and he created this crazy building, which had so many amazing details. For example, done by Salvador Dali or even Edward James himself. So, for example, one particular detail which I really liked, but I don't have it here on the pictures. But there was a carpet, which was the carpet which Edward James designed according to one concrete event. Edward James, he had his wife. It was Tilly Loche. It was a very fashionable dancer at the time, and this Tilly Loche was at the house, and there was a bathroom. And the bathroom, he asked Tilly Loche, go from the bathroom naked and all wet from the shower, and go through the corridor to her bedroom. And she did it, and she left the marks. She left the footprints with the water. And then Edward James created carpet with those footprints imprinted in the carpet. So these were kind of features which were all around this house. Unfortunately, today it's not anymore original. There are still some parts, but not as so. And Edward James also collaborated with this modernist architect Christopher Nicholson, who designed buildings like this, like a very modernist 1930s houses. But he also experimented with Edward James, and this is one of the project, and this was kind of an old ruin of the old castle, and Christopher Nicholson was supposed to rebuild it, but he didn't. It was only on a paper. And this is the same. This is so-called House Artichoke or Artichoke House. And this is a wooden structure in the shape of artichoke. And this is quite funny. This should be Salvador Dali standing here. So he even painted or like draw Salvador Dali as his friend inside the artichoke house. And Edward James, and it's another connection to Mexico. Edward James then left the Europe, and in 40s he built he started to build this Las Pozas, which is the kind of a utopian city in the jungle, which kind of reminded some legendary, almost kind of Indiana Jones, Jules Verne stories. And he built these kind of structures which they didn't have any purpose. They were only like a pavilions in the jungle, and they had these kind of stairs which ends somewhere in the space, and it's still there. You can visit. It's now kind of a touristic attraction, and there are several structures like this spread it around the forest. And there is one more quite extraordinary thing, a house called El Aquila, which means eagle, in a city called Atlantida. And you can maybe you don't believe, but it's true. The Atlantida is a real place. It's in Uruguay, and in Uruguay there is this crazy house which was designed by Natalio Michelizzi, who was not an architect. He was an entrepreneur. He was kind of an adventurous guy, and he designed this house in the shape of eagle head, and also in the shape of this fish, which is not existing anymore. Now there is only the eagle head here, but the whole house was looking like this, you know. So this is also pretty wild imagination. There is just little connection to Giorgio de Chirico as a metaphysical painter, who was the predecessor of Surrealist, and Italian rational architecture, or like a fascist architecture, where you can see this like favorite motif of arcades. So of course this is not Surrealist architecture, but it somehow reflects the heritage of or the same kind of a narrative which Giorgio de Chirico used. There is like some also buildings which are not really Surrealist, but they were decorated by Surrealist painters, like Leonstein and Kursal in Ostende, which is a huge like a hall, like cultural hall, and there are paintings by Paul Delvaux. Paul Delvaux was a Belgian Surrealist painter. He is famous for such paintings of dreamy landscapes and the figures, and he designed this mural for the Ostende. And there is this very ordinary, simple building in Copenhagen called Wettbewerb, and it was designed by Tige Hvass. Architect maybe you never heard about, me neither, until when I saw this building and I wanted to know more a little bit about. So this building is let's say example of pre-war functionalist modernist architecture in Denmark. But what is interesting on this is the decoration. And actually the decoration for that building was done by Surrealist artists. And you have these like pipes or like drains for water, designed by Olaf Steyer-Nielsen, who was the sculptor, in the shape of animals, as you can see, walrus and sea lion. And there are even like more interesting details on the front doors, which they have just only these kind of a fragmented details of nature, you know. So you have a frog, you have a shell, you have a piece of corn or some flower, and so on. And inside, and it's unbelievable that it's still there are original oil canvas paintings by these two artists, Bjerke Pedersen and Elsa Thoresen. They were very prominent Danish Surrealist painters, and they decorated this building with a few paintings, and they are still there. It's really amazing. So this is really not the Surrealist architecture, but I want to show only the connection that even Surrealism could contribute to the, let's say, decoration of the buildings. This is Tony Duquet. Tony Duque was an American scenographer and choreographer and theater designer and a movie set designer in the from the 20s, and he was quite a bit inspired by Surrealism. And I visited his house, which is his house in Beverly Hills. It's called Dornrich. It's from the 40s, and it's the only surviving project, interior project he designed. And it's a house full of crazy contradictions, crazy manierist connections of many different cultures, because he was inspired by, let's say, classical French, let's say, aristocratic style, but also he traveled a lot in Asia, and he collected a lot of artifacts from Asia. So he mixed it together, and I think he kind of worked a little bit as a surrealist, because he really put together things which had no real connection at the beginning, and he created these new connections. So this is quite interesting, and kind of a similar example can be Tommaso Buzzi and his project of so-called La Scarzuola, which is the old monastery he bought. Tommaso Buzzi, he actually designed the interiors of very famous Villa Necchi in Milan. It was not really Portalupe. He designed the house, but the interiors were done by Tommaso Buzzi. So he was a mostly decorator, but this he built for himself. So he bought the monastery, and he created this very, very bizarre world of all kind of shapes and forms. And if we are talking about surrealism and architecture, we have to mention also Carlo Molino, the famous Turinese architect, designer, but also skier and pilot of airplanes and car racer, and foremost dandy, or like a man who really overwhelmed himself in life and all his kind of passions, what he did in life. I really like this series of his auto portraits, because he was always kind of, he was manipulating himself into some kind of a roles, and that's kind of surrealist. And he was also the photographer, so he took pictures of female models in kind of a surrealist atmosphere. He was reading surrealist manifestos, because he was buying the journal Minotaur, which was the journal actually where Roberto Matta's Manifesto of Sensitive Mathematics was published in. So he really knew about surrealist movement, and as you can see, some of his creations are very surrealist. They are almost like objects of, again, like a Giacometti or someone like this. He also worked with the collage or photomontage, so he didn't really he manipulate his buildings into some scenarios. So for example, this is the building of a horse riding school which he designed, but of course he didn't really photograph the horse like this there, so he photomontaged the horse there. So he was creating kind of a new reality of his buildings. So this is kind of very much surrealist approach. And his interiors are, let's say, kind of a surrealist chambers of desires, and this is like a desire, the sexuality, the tension, the passions, everything was really key to Surrealism. So Carlo Molino also used it in his highly manierist spaces, but also his furniture design, which also has a lot of in common with the Surrealism. And I highly recommend, if you haven't been, just go to Turin to visit Casa Molino. It's an amazing space, apartment, which was completely designed by Carlo Molino for, let's say, his kind of artistic vision. He never lived in this apartment. He just designed it. There are some rumors or theories that he designed it as his kind of a tomb or like a mausoleum for himself, because there are different kind of setups with a lot of symbolism, with like turtle shells and shells and different kind of natural motifs and so on, which kind of created the story, which has really like a hidden stories within. So, I could talk about it another 2 hours or just only about this apartment. So let's move a little bit. Of course, I have to mention Isamu Noguchi, which was the Japanese American designer and sculptor mainly, and also his designs of furniture or object. This is actually the nurse. This is the one of the first like electrical nurses for taking care of babies. He designed, and this is the chess table, So for playing chess, very organic and even like in his interior project, Isamu Noguchi, he was very like a liquid, like his forms were very liquid. They look like they are flowing in the space, and they are also very similar to what we saw on the Salvador Dali's paintings, how the forms are getting liquid and they are formed into different shapes and so on. So here we have some examples of this, and this is the house which is called Sea Change in Maine in USA, which was designed by Isamu Noguchi and Wallace Harrison, architect of UN building in US. And unfortunately, this house was totally burned down in the 90s, was completely destroyed. But the owners, they decided to make a replica of this house. So what you see here, it's a 100% authentic replica of this house. And Isamu Noguchi designed a lot of elements into this house. As you can see, mostly this unbelievable table, which also has this Dali aesthetic, the something which is strong and rational, like this metal foot, with something which is organic, liquid, and unrationalist, let's say. So, and we are moving to the end of my lecture, actually to the last section, and it's a sculptural architecture, which was, let's say, influenced by this guy, very influential, Friedrich Kiesler. Friedrich Kiesler was born in Austria, then he lived in Paris, and then he moved to USA. And in the 40s, he designed this Art of this Century gallery, which was a gallery space of Peggy Guggenheim, a famous collector. And this gallery, I think it's a 100% surrealist interior, basically, which was based on the vision that everything is somehow connected to one nature. So there is no difference between painting There's no difference between painting, sculpture, or design or architecture. Everything is kind of a one world. And this is mostly, or this idea, what Friedrich Kiesler called it as a Surrealism, which went to the prominence with his idea of so-called endless house. And the endless house, it's a project which Friedrich Kiesler conceived in the 40s. He never got a chance to complete this project. It was the idea of kind of a cave house structure which would be built without plans, let's say, without exact plans. It would be built as an intuitive living environment, which would bring the sense of some prehistoric roots, which means that us as a people, as a society, we are coming from cave. Our first habitats were caves, and this was kind of a notion that Friedrich Kiesler wanted to suggest. And also there is this idea of let's say the birth of each of us, because we are from our mother, and when we are still in our mother belly, let's say, we are most comfortable there. It's like the most comfortable environment, and then we are like kicked out, and we are on this real world, and we have to deal with all the problems and difficulties. But when we are in our mother belly, it's the most, or for Kiesler, it was the most natural habitat, let's say. So he wanted to create this kind of a house, but he never succeeded. Unfortunately, he never built the actual house. But these theories of Surrealism, they had a big impact on a whole generation of mainly French architects. And this is my last section of this lecture, that I was studying and researching quite a lot and visiting these houses, which are called Maison Boule, which you can see here, Maison Boule, like a bubble houses. And the most famous guy and girl who did them were the wife and husband couple, Pascal Heusermann and Claude Costi. And they designed a lot of these houses. We can't call them, let's say, surrealist. Of course, they are not really surrealist, but as I told you, they are derived from Friedrich Kiesler ideas, and I would rather tell them they are sculptural architecture. But of course, their background is or can be surrealism. These Maison Boules, they were created actually like Friedrich Kiesler envisioned. They were created without exact plans. They were created as a sculpture. Most of them were created in through the technique called gunite. Gunite was a sprayed concrete. So the guys, they had structures which were made from the wires, from the metal structures, metal rods and wire sheets, and then they sprayed under the strong pressure. They sprayed the concrete on the top of these metal structures. So all this, as you can see here, it was sprayed on it to create compact layer. And so you had to really create it basically any kind of shapes you wanted. And it was quite, let's say, even the rebellion against modernism, rebellion against all strict hygiene, simple spaces. It was more about the roots of our civilizations, let's say, and creating the house which will feel as natural as possible. These photos are from the house of Claude Costi and Pascal himself. Pascal died, but Claude Costi is still alive, and I met her there. It was unbelievable, very beautiful experience for me to visit her in her house. This is her workshop. She also works with the ceramic, and what you see here, it's crazy. It's a fiberglass. It's a fiberglass roof, which is kind of transparent, but it's not possible to see through. And all this, colors, and it's a dirt. It's a dirt from outside, and stained, and it creates kind of a beautiful, really beautiful, almost like a cave-like forms and structures. And this is another work of Pascal Heusermann. It's actually for sale now. This building. It's a ceramic atelier he designed for his friends, ceramic designers, artists, in Ponzas, close to Lyon. And it's not the house, it's an atelier building. It's a workshop inside, and you can see these again very, very biomorphic organic shapes with these a little bit more technical features of these balls inserted into this architecture. So this is how it looks like from behind. It really looks like rocks, so even you can see that the architecture is then formed by nature, that there is a moss grew on it, and it really became a part of nature, which was kind of a Friedrich Kiesler idea. And this is Pierre Sequet and Henry Mouet, another representatives of this movement. And you can see this house here they designed, which is called Maison Verly in Seburg, and it should look like as a flower. That the house is like here. It's kind of like a tree trunk, or like a trunk of the flower, and here are like a blossom, and so on. So it has this kind of idea of a naturalistic environment, and this house is also I think the continuation of Friedrich Kiesler ideas. It has some crazy interiors. You can see it's in very bad shape now. Even it's a protected monument today. It's quite in a bad shape, and it needs a very, very big restoration. But unfortunately, the owners are very old, and they don't have money, they don't have energy. So hopefully it will get some funding or something to restore this really unique example of again like a sculptural architecture influenced by Surrealism. And there are some more. There is Daniel Grattaloup in Geneva in Switzerland. Very not typical Swiss buildings, again designed as a kind of a caves, and this is Jacques Giet in Belgium. This is the house I visit in Liège, and it was designed for the brother of Jacques Giet, and again the same structure. So it's a metal wires shaped into domes, let's say, and then the concrete was sprayed on these structures, and it really looks like a cave, like rock formations, as you can see here, even inside, with these like weird steps and so on. And this is Philippe Mousset, called also it's Maison Boule in Fleres. This was designed a little bit differently. This was really interesting. It was like there was a stretched textile, like a fabric which was stretched, and the fabric was stretched around the circular metal rods, and then on this fabric was putting the concrete. So concrete was formed by stretched fabrics, and it's also this kind of a very like organic space inside. It was recently renovated, so it looks quite nice now, but it was also in very bad shape only a few years ago, but fortunately was now renovated, and I think you can even now stay there, or you can rent it through Airbnb. Yes, and this is actually the very, very last thing. As Daniel told you before, that I am ending, let's say, my research in the 80s, and the postmodern is a little bit kind of on the edge of my interest. So I want to show you one more postmodern project, which I would also say it's kind of a little bit inspired by Surrealism, but it's actually not so special, because actually this project was inspired by everything, because postmodernism is about everything, about all kind of references from the past or from different cultures. And this is the house called Cosmic House, designed by Charles Jenks mainly, but also his friends Terry Farrell and Michael Graves. And this house, it's all about seasons and about cosmology, as it is in the name. So you have different kind of rooms, which are their design was created according to the symbolism of seasons, mostly. So there is a spring room, there is autumn room, summer room, winter room. You can see here there is even Egyptian room, and so on. So all these references, let's say, also brings a little bit surrealist to this project. And fortunately, today you can visit this building. It's open to students and to visitors as a study center. There is a huge library which you can study in, and it's really great project. As you can see, Charles Jenks was inspired by everybody, from Charles Rennie Mackintosh, this is very Mackintosh style, to Surrealism, this like fragments of human bodies. It's also very surrealistic, and even by Brunelleschi, because this is Borromini. I think this is a detail of jacuzzi which Charles Jenks designed as a upside down roof or ceiling of one of the Borromini's famous Baroque churches. So Charles Jenks had the baths in Borromini's ceiling of his famous Baroque church. So this is kind of also surrealist. And that's all. Thank you very much for attention. As I told you, it's very difficult to really define the pure surrealist architecture. I think it's not even possible. So I try to, let's say, combine different let's say, sources and different ways how surrealism had an impact on architecture and building culture and design and and a product design and interior design. So thank you very much.
Hey, thank you very much. It was a pleasure to listen to this world around tour you gave us. It really shows that thoughts are not bound to a specific place. It shows that ideas are traveling. Sometimes they're meeting in certain places, like the office of Le Corbusier, for example, artists in Paris. But then they are even floating quite far. Sometimes you don't know where they really picked it up. Probably people are quite important to think about. But it's always a connection. It's always a connection between art, architecture, and in terms of architecture, it's always important the client.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you remain maybe in a furniture.
Yeah,
This would have
that's
been
true.
another lecture you could do.
Yeah.
I'm sure, as I know you. What is interesting with this topic, no, what would interest me in this topic is what fascinates you in these houses and in surrealism. What attracts you there? Because I think you have you have really a pleasure to talk about it. These houses trigger you.
Yeah. Because they are kind of different than anything or any other houses I have seen. That they really are like a kind of a they really try to live differently, like completely, like that like to broke with the traditional, but even with the modernist idea of thinking of living, that you have a white box with the large windows, but suddenly I don't know.
Oh, I think we lost you somehow.
That of architects, this decision to go to totally radical perspective on living. And of course, as an architecture historian, I'm also very interested in exploring the art in architecture, and these houses are basically art themselves. They're it's a sculpture and an architecture in one. So it's not like that someone is building some house and then some sculptor decorate it with the sculpture, but it's like really in one, and this is something what really fascinates me.
Yep. And probably what one should underline is, for sure, all the architecture photographs you showed are made by you.
Not all.
Not all? I thought so.
No. Of course, there are some buildings I haven't been to. All the organic houses, those maison bulls I visited, they are all my photos. But of course, there are some of these, for example, these Isamu Noguchi projects, which I never visited, unfortunately. Or there are some, of course, you saw it, that there are quite a lot of houses which are not anymore around, so they were demolished, they are not existing anymore. So I used the archive photography, but yes, the main ones, let's say the Antonio Bonnet, it was one of my adventures that I really wanted to see his building, so that's why I went down to Uruguay, like to see and so on. And in France, all these like sculpture houses are mostly in France. They are actually mostly located in this area on the border with Switzerland, France, Germany. It's like this, like kind of close to Geneva. This is the region I went around and I tried to visit those houses.
Has it something to do with the possibility for you to go there because it's easier, even language-wise and travel-wise, or has it something to do that somehow architecture thinking and clients met? It's
I think
interesting.
that there was even like some like a cross-border collaborations of these architects. Like Pascal Heusermann also collaborated with some clients in Switzerland, building something there, and but somehow there was this concentration of these architects in this area. Even like Daniel Grataloup, I met him personally. He told me that it was super hard to build such a house in Geneva, that it was much more kind of restricted than maybe his colleagues could do in France. But still, he built it actually. So actually don't know exactly why this area was so dynamic for this kind of architecture, but it's there. It's also quite close to Ronchamp, and even like when we can criticize Corbusier, and even the Daniel Grataloup, he told me, "Oh, Corbusier, he was the biggest enemy of ours. He was the biggest evil." But actually, then he added, "Yeah, but his Chapel of Ronchamp is great project. So I think these guys they appreciated late Corbusier works.
Yeah, that's for sure. Even let's bring it back to Olgiati.
Oh yeah.
Even there you have
That's true.
this Corbusier is quite open for a lot of interpretations, and this is that's the great thing on this about his work, that it's so open for a lot of different interpretations and
Yeah.
thinking. So therefore, I wouldn't limit him to a certain way of thinking. Probably the most problematic aspect is the urban aspect in his way.
Yeah, that's true.
But a surrealistic urbanism is existing to go in a different, but it just would need too much force.
I think in the let's say more broader sense of the meaning of surrealism, I think like surrealistic urbanism could be a work of superstudio, like kind of those utopian ideas, that they were so disconnected from the reality, let's say. We could call them surrealist a little bit, maybe.
In a certain way, yes.
Yeah.
Or a very early projects like Gaudi and so on,
Oh yeah.
who really who worked in the morphology of the city with his projects.
Or maybe Antonio Sant'Elia, but he is more like a futurist, of course.
But there things are coming close and interact with each other, and that's a good and interesting thing. But what during your lecture I was thinking about, it's not just that it stops in the 80s.
No,
it's
for sure not.
That then it got very rational for a certain way, and more construction and so on, especially in the Swiss case. But when we see what happened today, I'm talking about the architecture of Sana, with the reflections, with the glass walls they're using. There you can really find Ishigami and so on. There you can find quite a lot of contemporary echoes in a good
Yes.
way, and
Yes.
in a very straight way, which are still reflecting this overpassing the image of how it needs to be, how it used to be, and that's an interesting push in a completely different direction. And
Yeah.
even today with KI or all this already Photoshop made it
Oh,
possible
exactly. That's true.
to bring back the architecture into a very poetic world, which opens quite a lot.
Yeah. No, I was working like few years ago on this exhibition which was called Casa Imaginaria, and it was about the fictional architecture which started to appear on social media, in the like mainly during COVID, and I would say this architecture, I would say that it was about escapism, because in COVID we were like locked in our apartments. We had no chance to socially behave or like be in the city. So a lot of artists, they started to create these like a beautiful images of beautiful interiors, like somewhere in a desert or in a jungle or in some like a seaside. And they were also there was this like a bit of surrealism, because of course they were not existing, those places, they were like a pure imaginary, and they were like, let's say, playing with our minds, what we had during the COVID. We were locked in between four walls, and no possible escape, basically. So this was kind of a movement which I felt it. And even I think like I have another book here in my library about surrealist architecture, and you can even find some projects of Zaha Hadid in this book, like a early projects, like from the 80s, or Tom Main, from Morphosis, or Greg Lynn, for example. So there are much more examples which you can connect surrealism to even contemporary architecture.
Yeah, and that's an interesting thing but I'm just going back to very normal architecture. I think what one can learn, or what's the interesting thing is in the further development of architecture, we are in a time where a lot of things are changing, securities are crawling down, and the architecture will be different in 10 years. That's I'm completely sure. Even the interest in what we teach is different, and such projects open as well as space to rethink architecture and to
Yeah.
rethink not just in a poetic way, in a sense of pure poetry. That's one thing, that's one
But
level.
as function, right?
As function, yeah, what previous generations just thought it's unthinkable.
Yes.
And the unthinkable, to experiment with the unthinkable, or the where people just laugh about, and that's the interesting thing.
Yeah.
And therefore it's not just an artistic game but it opens possibilities for much more, even for these
Exactly.
architects.
Yeah, exactly. I was thinking about this like manifesto of Roberto Matta, the sensitive mathematics, which I think this is so like intelligent, like, of course, at the time when it was created in the 30s, it was completely impossible to imagine something like this. But now, or in 10 years, in 20 years, those ideas will be probably quite close to its realizations, because we maybe in the future we will have buildings which will be moving and will be like in constant transformation, let's say, and uh, because the technology will allow us to do them.
Yeah, and that's the great thing, and because architecture needs this space of thinking, and even
Yeah.
this free space of thinking. Probably not everything which you just do, even with Le Corbusier, can see he's developing his ideas. They all need to develop their ideas. They're not just
Yeah.
falling from heaven. And the things you just show, sometimes it's quite ridiculous in a certain way,
Yeah.
but it's fun.
Yeah.
And it's fun, and it's quite interesting that things in the 20s you could build in the 60s, because you had as well
Yeah.
different techniques and different
Yes. Yes.
possibilities. And so
Yeah.
you need to experiment and you need to do something, and that's probably the best part of this surrealism, even if it's difficult in the way to build it, transform it directly,
Yeah. Yeah.
but it's a stimulation.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
It's a stimulation for much more than just a building. It's a conceptual thing.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's interesting that a lot of people you showed disappeared in history.
Yeah.
They're so
That's
extremely artistically, or they're just pushing the borders, that not many remain. Or why do you see, do you have an explanation for this? That you showed a lot of names,
yeah.
Even Swiss architects. I have never
Yeah.
heard.
Like yeah. Like of course. Like for me now, they are already known. I know them very well already because I researched them, but of course I know that they are outside of the mainstream. And I think it's from a lot of different reasons that they were simply not so active in their self promotion, as others, and they like fell into oblivion, let's say, or they did architecture which was not well published, and so on. I think only Isamu Noguchi from all these names, it's very like a big, like I think today that's the it's like really famous name, let's say in art and design. Or even Frederick Kiesler, I think it's becoming more and more known. But yeah, it's always the interpretation of the history. And I was recently in USA, and I was talking to Paul Goldberg, the architecture historian from New York, and yeah, we were talking about how even MoMA, with the Philip Johnson, who curated the International Style exhibition, how these architects kind of preferred, or their preferences were some, and it was this like a really 100% modernism coming from Bauhaus in the best case, and they basically like they removed everything else, kind of. They were not seeing, I don't know, even Frank Lloyd Wright, was a little bit something different for them, so they really pushed the international style, and the international style, it's the only way of architecture. And then it became a mainstream in encyclopedia and in all the books. And I think it's quite natural, because always in the history there is one main line of interpretation. And I think the history of modern architecture is not as old that we would have more these lines, but I think now it's happening. Now we are in the time when researchers like me and many others, they suddenly, or they have, now it's the time to discover lesser known, and fill the gaps, fill the empty holes in the history of architecture. And I think it's really fun because I really observe it, like, on a daily basis, that what I see, what books are coming out, what new names of architects which were forgotten, they are suddenly published. So I think we are filling the gaps slowly. But I think this one let's say, interpretation of history of architecture is so strong that it's very hard to break it somehow. So we can fill the gaps, we can fill the holes, but still the mainstream will stay the same, kind of. But yeah, and it's a Mies, it's Gropius, and it's Corbusier, and that's it.
No, that's as well good. I don't have a problem with that we have these huge heroes. I
Yeah,
think they are sometimes as well needed.
yeah, of course.
I studied as well with one of the heroes of the 90s, and it gives another impact, and that's very good, and it's very important to have these kind of things. But nevertheless, what probably shows as well, what you just showed, is that architecture is more rich than just
Exactly.
these straight lines we probably know, which are published,
Yes.
and these somehow you tried to combine these different lines with the idea of surrealism. Nevertheless, Molino was quite a local guy in a certain way, and of course he has seen a lot. It's much more important to do your thing at the place you are, and that's the great thing.
Yeah.
Especially in the case of Molino, it's so poetic, and it's still so poetic. And there you showed a part of it. There are other parts still existing. All these discotheques with this light and mirrors. It's incredible what he really did. With you.
Oh, I hear you.
Yes, you disappeared.
Yes, you disappeared too.
And it's just important to I think it's important to go your way, to go to do this kind of thing, and to trigger the edges as well with architecture, not just the mass production. And even you have this production, you still need some space, some open space to think about what's architecture, what's the role.
Yeah. And like, for me, it's a big joy, to basically bring those names, those hidden, forgotten names, to like people like you, people like architects, who maybe are even more, surprised because they don't have a time to research like me. They have their own work, but they are happy to see the new inspiration for references and for like their own work, maybe. So I think it's really, I'm really happy to live in such a time that now we have also the space that we can explore these lesser known, creators, and create new stories in architecture history.
But what would interest me, you visited these houses, and these houses, probably all of them are quite exceptional in one way or another. And if you compare these buildings, or let's say these exceptions, with the rest what they have done, is it still were they just working on this kind of building things, or how are they often, what's the relation from these works with their normal production?
Like, I think most of these architects, they did only these houses, you know. They didn't have like a standard production, let's say. They were from the start, they like rethought modernism, and they started to produce these buildings. And but of course I adore them, I really love them, but on the same time, these buildings, if you are in them, I would say it's not always a pleasure space, you know. It's somehow sometimes weird, you know. It doesn't work, you know, so much sometimes. It really, you really feel like in the cave, you know, sometimes. So could be like claustrophobic even, you know, and also the technologies which were used on creating these houses, they were very experimental on the time. So these houses are very hard to maintain today. They have a lot of problems uh, with leaking and all the other stuff, which, but of course they also have the problems of other avant-garde houses, you know, like Corbusier and Wright houses. They are always leaking, you know. So yeah, I wouldn't say that this bubble architecture or these bubble houses are the best way to live. Probably, I don't know if I would like to live in such a house, but it's so exciting to explore it, you know, or to experience it.
Yeah, so this means that on one hand, these houses are often more thought atmospherically as atmospheres.
Yeah, probably. And for me, like what I see from them, or what I bring from them, it's this like a lesson in how architecture can be very different, you know, than an average or something like that. So, and it can be the feeling that, oh my God, this house was crazy, you know, like this house was, I wouldn't live there, you know, but still you are leaving the house with the pure joy, you know, because it's like, come on, this is the house, like, why, you know, but still you are kind of admiring it, you know, because it's something totally different.
Which brings us to another thing, what architecture can do. It's not just a romantic movie. The life is much richer.
Yes, it can be
And you can create this as a
existentialist, you know.
space.
Yeah.
And that's a fantastic thing to do.
Yeah.
Because architectural life is much more interesting in this broader sense, in this broader idea of what architecture is. It's not just a romantic way of coziness and cozy living.
No,
and
for sure.
and yeah, sometimes this the movie and architecture are somehow quite close. And I was always a bit disturbed with, during my studies, my movie were quite important, but it was always more the nice or the romantic or the cozy or the straight thing which you created. And all the rest movies had as a possible space to create, or were important to create. This was completely extracted from the architecture. And these architects somehow bring together much more of life. And much more of possibilities of life. And that's an interesting thing. That's an interesting thing what you could do. On one hand, it could be the form as you described, but it's not just the form. It's there are different levels how to play with it.
Yes, exactly.
And it's not just sometimes it's a collaboration between architecture and artists, or the architect is himself an artist. There are extremely many possibilities to play with, and the richness of architecture, I think that's the great thing.
Yes.
We can,
and that was kind of one of the ambitious to show in today's lecture.
yeah. Any questions from the students? If not, I really want to thank you very much.
Thank you
for
the
the
too.
time and the involvement. I really love this passion for architecture, which you really have.
Thank you.
No, it's a bit out of the box, and that's a good thing. And that's a good thing, that architecture is not just a building. Architecture is much more. It's not just construction, it's much more. And really, these buildings you showed, they open this space of thinking.
Yeah.
And I think
I would say architecture is a culture, because you can really read your history. You can read the stories from the buildings, and when you learn some principles of architecture and some history of architecture, then you can translate these stories to people, and that's I think kind of our role as a historians or journalists about architecture.
And what's interesting, it goes even further. These houses are houses with a character. And we often miss houses with character. We have all this standardization, we have all this how you need to do something.
Yes.
And what I miss often in architecture is, on one hand, it sounds a bit strange, but it's an address, that you have really a place where everybody knows it's this house. And it doesn't need to be just expressive, but it needs to be a place with character. And the buildings you showed, they really have character. And that's a very, 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 very good thing, that architecture can go so far.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Have a very nice evening.
Yes,
And
you
see
too.
you soon.
Keep in
Bye-bye.
touch, and
Keep
thank
in
you.
touch. Yes.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Adam.